Cool. So yes, thank you, Alice, and thank you everyone else for coming. So given the global situation, we thought it was very pertinent to study how students have responded to the online learning environment. And we figured that we could perhaps learn from it and see what aspects of it should perhaps still remain part of the student experience in the future as well. So our methodology for this was we were surveying economics undergrads, and we were complementing that data with interviews as well. The surveys were fairly in depth about 5 dimensions of LSE life that we identified to be the most important. So firstly, we picked classes because that's the main interface between students and staff at LSE, and it's where we feel that most of the learning is done. Lectures, we figured, would be quite a useful control because the nature of lectures hasn't really changed. And it would be very interesting to see if people's perception of lectures, given the situation, had changed. And that can frame how we look at our results as well. In LSE social life, in particular referencing societies. So has engagement with societies increased or not as a result of things going online? This one is particularly interesting to me since I was running one of LSE's larger societies. And it's interesting to look at how people perceive turnout and engagement with events. And out of LSE social life as well. So how is this affecting the interactions that students are able to have with other people, and of course careers, the ever important one in the background as well. So we surveyed students. We got around 70 respondents, and that was the focus of that, was like classes and lectures, and then we built on that with interviews. So I'll hand over to Naomi, who will talk through our results and recommendations.
Absolutely. So for our results, we compared the outcomes of the surveys, and then for various different groups of students, and then we complemented that with a bit more in-depth analysis from our interviews. So to start with, the results from our surveys showed that year 1 students, so first of all, so we split it up in 4 groups. So year group, fee status, mode of learning and gender. And then we analysed the differential impact of online learning on these different groups. So first of all, we considered year group and found that first years essentially were entirely dominated in terms of the results by year 2 and 3, essentially showing that years 2 and 3 preferred every aspect of classes and lectures and everything than year 1s did. We then compared by fee status, so looking at home students versus international students, as we thought that firstly that was a differential by kind of region, but also of course the actual fees have made a difference potentially as well. So we found that home students more kind of enjoyed classes and lectures and had a higher rate of satisfaction for classes and lectures, while international students, when we asked them to compare how they found this year compared to last year, international students actually found the comparison to be higher. So that was a kind of interesting dichotomy going on there. We then directly compared mode of learning as well, and we found that students who had chosen a kind of hybrid learning, so either switching from in-person to online or the other way around, or kind of just being a bit more flexible, that they preferred their classes to online or in-person students. And we found when we discussed this in the interviews that this was because of the kind of flexibility and because they found that they could, for example, use online classes when they had to be at home at the beginning of the term, but then when they moved back to London, they kind of enjoyed being able to choose to go between them. And then we found that online students were happier in comparison to last year, in fact, than in-person students, which slightly went against what we had initially expected. But when we kind of delved into this a bit more in the interviews, we found that the kind of reasoning for this was that people who were comparing in-person classes in a pandemic to in-person classes not in a pandemic, that's quite a kind of similar comparison, and therefore obviously the kind of in a pandemic came out worse, of course. Whereas when you're comparing online classes to in-person classes, this is kind of two quite different things, and we felt that people were more just like thinking of them as two separate things, not really that comparable, because they're just kind of very different. And that kind of explained why online classes kind of came out higher than in-person classes, because we found that the people who chose in person were very much thinking about how it was before and thinking, oh, it's a shame it wasn't like that, but of course it couldn't be. So that was kind of and then we also compared by gender and found that there was no difference between males and females. Going on to our recommendations quickly, we found that overall, all the students that we talked to were remarkably happy, or extremely happy with every aspect of LSE life in the Department of Economics. They had almost nothing but good to say. I had to push them quite strongly in order to come up with anything negative. So that was very nice to hear. And overall, we kind of talked about some going forward in pandemic and going forward generally. So going forward in pandemic, students found that interaction in classes was a bit low, and they some students had found that when their teachers had kind of very much like intensely encouraged, for example, cameras on, or students to like have to say something in each lesson, that really helped. So for example, any modules that had a participation grade or something like that really kind of helped to ensure that people started communicating, and they found that their learning increased when that happened. They also found that buildings being open and things like that also really helped. And going forward, generally, they just had found that teaching was fantastic, and students don't feel that they have lost out in terms of academics due to the pandemic at all. So yeah, I mean, I guess overall, the effect of online learning has, of course, had a negative effect on classes, but the kind of effect on academics has been very minimal, and it's more the kind of socializing and the social life that students feel that they have lost out on.